Every time there is a wrong KPI in a dashboard, or every time that you send wrong information to somebody, there are always two causes. The first one is the underlying data that you got was not what you expected. Could be that the data is wrong, or maybe that you were not properly informed about the contents of that data. The second cause is you messed up. You wrote a SQL that had a crazy bug that you didn't expect, or maybe there were some edge cases that didn't work, or there was a join that accidentally filtered out data that you needed. Those things happen. What matters is, as an analytics engineer, well, as a data engineer, if you're not able to identify which of the two is responsible, then both of them are technically your fault. And more important than assigning blame, the idea of constantly being on top of this is that it helps you to be proactive and to fix everything. DBT actually has quite a large suite of potential tests that you can apply to your SQL models. And in this video, I'm going to show you a little presentation that I made a couple of years back, displaying some of the options that you have in DBT. There is actually a whole iceberg of potential tests that you can apply. During this video, I'm going to tell you about most of them, definitely the most common ones that everybody should know of. The first one is singular test. These are tests that you put in the test directory, test folder, and what they are, they're just simple SQL statements. If these statements, when you query them, return more than 0 rows, essentially if there is at least one row that meets a certain criteria, that means that there is an error. Now this one, this is exactly the same example you can find in the DBT documentation, but in the real world, one of my favorite applications for this was we had 6 trucks and all of them had to be accounted for 24 hours of the day, even if they were parked or something. And so we created a test that the amount of minutes should always be whatever the equivalent is to 24 hours every single day for each of the trucks. And you have no idea how many times this test actually saved us, because we messed up the logic a couple of times, there were some data quality issues, and thanks to these tests we were always able to spot them, make sure that we always had the right data at the right moment. The second type of tests, these ones are a bit more niche, but they're still interesting, is source freshness tests. So in the YAML files, the ones that I've shown you in the previous videos, you are actually also able to add this little flag that you see right here. You can actually not see my finger that far. You can actually add this little text that says freshness. You can add warn after, error after, and the field that indicates when the data was loaded. Every time, once you already have that code in place, every time that you type in the command line DBT source freshness, DBT is going to check if your data is actually fresh according to that one field that you provided, which can be interesting, but it's not something that I see lots of people using. For some use cases, it's probably a lifesaver, but as probably the most common type of test that you see in DBT is the one coming next, which is the generic tests. Generic tests are also defined in your YAML. I think during the previous video, AI kind of spoiled some of these already. But essentially what you do is that, similar to how you add columns, similar how you add descriptions, you can also add a test field in there. And DBT normally ships with 4 types of tests: unique, not known, accepted values, and relationship, in which you simply point at another model. And for example, in this case, every single ID in the orders ID should match to an ID in the customer model. So it's a nice way to test your referential integrity. Those are the ones that come with DBT, only these 4. But as you can imagine, there is a way for you to build your own custom ones. The only thing that you need to do is to write them as SQL files, put them inside of the test folders in a subfolder called generic, and then you just simply type SQL files using, of course, the right Jinja, which is what you see on the screen. Test, warn, if odd. Once again, these are very basic examples that you can find in the DBT documentation, nothing crazy. Being honest, there have been a handful of times where I build this, especially when there are unique taxing codes, unique taxing norms, like if, for example, if a vehicle is bigger than this and it's built in a certain year and blah blah, then the tax should be this. For those cases that were very unique to my organizations, I built them. But, and this is already a little spoiler from the next video, there are also some DBT packages that have lots of tests, and I'm gonna cover that in a moment. So even though this might seem amazing, believe it or not, the DBT community has already tackled a lot of the types of tests that you might want to already implement. Another one that we're going to cover today is unit test. Now, this one is only available starting from 1.8, which was, I believe, a couple of years back. So it's not new, but it's new-ish, and it's not as widely adopted as you can imagine. So whenever there is very complex, like rolling windows or regular expressions or something about your SQL, in DBT, you're actually able, you see here, this would be like the model. You're actually able to add a fixture file in which you actually specify, if I give you this value, so if this is the input data, this should be my output. And this is quite nice because it allows you to preventively and defensively test for things, even if like some potential quality errors that have not appeared in your data just yet. This allows you to know how your models will behave even before you actually see real cases of that in like in the real world. And the final that we're going to cover today is model contracts. We already saw how you can define things like data types, how you can define things like constraints inside of your YAMLs. What I didn't really tell you is under the model name, if you add a little config block that says contract and you say enforced equal true, DBT is going to fail when one of these characteristics that you specify, either these constraints or these data types, does not match the model that you're trying to build. Which is kind of really nice. Ideally, this comes from the concept of data contracts. So you can sit down with your stakeholder, they tell you, hey, we need this data set for a dashboard. And then you can sit down, try to negotiate this column, how fresh it is, what are the data types, what are the column names. And if what they try to give you as input doesn't match whatever you discuss in your model contract or data contract, this is going to fail. So it can be a very nice feature. Those are all of the ways in which you can test. Now, technically, there are some more around deployment, like CI pipelines and some more automated testing, but that's something I want to cover later in the future. For now, all of these examples were very basic, but I hope they opened your eyes about all of the possibilities that you have to test all of your code in DBT. And remember, whenever you're in a mature data environment, it's super important that you, one, detect errors in time, and two, that you know exactly why did they happen and how do you fix them. And DBT tests, all of them, it's a nice step towards that goal.